Welcome back, everybody. We're finishing up our 2024 MLS season preview. Today, we are previewing Atlanta United. We are here with Jason Longshore from Soccer Down Here. Jason, tell us a little bit about yourself and where we can find your work.
Yeah, you can find me on social media at Longshoe, Soccer Down Here. I'm more in like a producer kind of role, pop on as a guest now. John Nelson's driving the daily show there. 92.9 The Game, where our Atlanta United broadcasts are. My show's on Tuesday nights over there. Atlanta Soccer Tonight. You can get it wherever you get your podcast as well. Tuesdays at 10 is our live radio time, but it's always available on demand wherever you get your podcast.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, I think it's our fourth time doing just this, and maybe your fifth or sixth time on the podcast.
Yeah.
Always love to have you on, one of the most knowledgeable guys around Atlanta United, and this is always a fun team to talk about, whether it's good or whether it's bad. It's always a good time.
There's always something to talk about, and that's what's cool about it. Covering Atlanta United, calling games, following all the storylines. I mean, whether we're talking academy, first team, second team, there's always something going on, and it's been really cool to be part of that from day one.
Absolutely. And Atlanta is a relatively new team, and not one that I knew had such a robust soccer culture there. But you guys hit the ground running MLS Cup right off the bat with Tata Martino, who's back in Major League Soccer now. Just so many good stories. Let's talk about what happened last year. 13 wins, 12 draws, 9 losses, 6th in the Eastern Conference. Scored 66 goals, which was second in the East, and conceded 53 goals, which was third worst in the East. This was the team that would score. They'd put them up on you and give them right back. They were eliminated by the Crew in the first round of the MLS playoffs. Now, there was a lot of excitement around the squad last year with big summer transfers. They added Seba, Silva, and Moyamba, 3 players who were just slotted in as starters. I project them to all be starting 11 players this season. Built one of the top offenses in Major League Soccer. They had, Giakoumakis chasing a golden boot until the final few weeks. Let's talk about 2023.
Felt like 3 different years all in one, honestly. Like the team as it was constructed off the jump was good. It was a good team. Lots of goals conceded, especially in that first portion of the year. And ultimately, you needed to make some moves to improve. You didn't have the cap space to just go add people, so you had to subtract a little bit to add. So that middle portion, it was short, thankfully, where the windows started to open in terms of outgoing moves. You had a few players leave that were starting, that were playing a lot of minutes. Franco Ibarra, I thought, had a good first half of the season. Andrew Gutman contributed a lot over his time in Atlanta. But you had to move guys out, add some space under your cap to then go add players. And you upgraded with the additions that you made with Saba Lobjanidze replacing Luis Araujo, with Tristan Muyamba coming into that midfield, with Sean De Silva coming in, also getting Edwin Mosquera back. He was out on loan to Defensa y Justicia, came back in the summer. He was a big part of that second half of the year. Really, the way it breaks out, I feel like whenever we go to Leagues Cup, we almost say that that's the midway point. It's not. It's really more like the 2/3 point. And that last third of the year for Atlanta United was outstanding. That team was a lot of fun to watch. I wish they'd had a little more time to gel. I think they would have been in a better position to deal with Columbus. Columbus was the last team anybody wanted to see when you got to the postseason. I thought what Wilfred Nancy did with that group, and they upgraded in the summer as well.
Yeah.
And getting, I think a lot of people zeroed in on the Julian Gressel acquisition. For me, it was the Rudy Camacho acquisition. That's what gave them the defense that they wanted, because you look at that team, a lot of times they played Camacho as the only real center back. Steven Moreira is a converted fullback. They'd play Malte Amundsen next to him,
Who's
converted
also
fullback.
a converted fullback, yeah.
Yeah, Sean Zawadski is a converted midfielder. I mean, but you needed that guy to hold it down. Camacho took him to the next level. And when it was Atlanta's matchup with them, I think you saw how important home field advantage is. I think you saw how good the Crew were. And ultimately, Atlanta wasn't good enough in the games in Columbus. So the first game you were missing Thiago Almada, kind of expected that to be a struggle. Tried something a little bit different. It didn't come off. The third game of the series, after winning the game big in Atlanta, if you don't fall behind and giving up a goal kind of early, maybe that one turns out differently, but that's what Columbus did to you. They pressed you, they forced you into mistakes. Atlanta made those mistakes and ultimately had a really good finish to the year, but you ran into a buzzsaw that was Columbus.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better myself. Let's take a look at exactly who contributed. You had Giakoumakis with 19 goals, 2 assists. Thiago Almada with 12 goals and 16 assists. The youngster getting busy on the score sheet early and often. Tyler Wolff, 5 goals and 1 assist. Brooks Lennon, 4 goals, but 12 assists. Caleb Wiley, 4 goals, 4 assists. And Saba, you're going to help me with that last name? Well, it just comes off your tongue so clean.
Saba Lobjanidze.
Exactly what I said the first time. 3 goals, 4 assists for the new right winger. So when we see this, I mean, you're top heavy with these two guys, Giakoumakis and Almada. But there were other players who contributed. I mean, I like to see Brooks Lennon, 12 goals. That's a huge 12 assists. Yeah. That's a huge contribution. And, with guys like Silva and Saba joining the team, they're going to have a full preseason, a full system, a full camp to really put it together. I like this team. There's a lot of contributors here.
Yeah, the attack is ridiculous. And look, the question that we're going to talk about a good bit, Thiago Almada, we don't know what the future looks like and how long he's here. He's not here for a long time. He might be here for the start of the season. He might be here for the first half of the season. He might be here for the whole season. We don't really know at this point. And I know there's rumors floating around even tonight with Fiorentina's name popping up. Atletico Madrid had popped up. It's going to be a wild couple of days as the window closes in Europe. And with Almada, his ultimate destination is Europe. So that's the one complete unknown as to what happens next with Atlanta United with Almada's future. But you get a full year of Yorgos Giakoumakis, and he actually had an off season this year because he had played Celtics last season and then came in and went straight into the Atlanta United season. He had some injuries, and he talked about, kind of at the end of the year, he was hurting. He was really feeling the effects of playing almost 18 months straight. And getting that break for him is going to be big. I thought he looked good in the preseason opener over in Birmingham on the weekend. You get that full preseason with Xande Silva, who he also talked about kind of feeling it at the end of the season, not fully fit coming in off of the League Two season in France and not getting that time to gel with this group. Saba, he was in as good a shape as you could be coming in mid-season, but still, it's hard. So now you get a full preseason with these guys. It's going to help. It's going to help a lot. And you've added some pieces defensively that I think give you a little more balance.
Then let's get right into it. Incoming and outgoing play. It's like you're a professional, and that transition was just so seamless.
Yeah, no.
Well, we'll go outgoing players first. Miles Robinson, and this is one of the best center backs around Major League Soccer. And you would think that's a huge loss, but he was also a center back on one of the worst defenses in Major League Soccer. It's so strange to me how in soccer more than any other sport, with the defense, you can put an all-star team together and they don't work sometimes. So, yes, it hurts. Miles Robinson is one of those players you'd never want to see leave. But the defense doesn't get worse that he left because they can't really get worse than what they put up last year, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't on Miles specifically. I mean, Miles made some mistakes that cost the team goals, as did everybody on the field at times. It was, when you look at the defense last season for Atlanta United, a lot of it was those mistakes that cost them goals. It wasn't because you had bad players or a lack of talent. It was mistakes. And look, Atlanta United is going to give up goals. This is a team that is not going to be, I don't think, at the top of the league when it comes to goals conceded. I think they're going to give up some goals because of the way they play. They take chances to go get goals. So they're always going to commit numbers forward. That puts defenders under pressure. But when they make mistakes when they're under pressure, that's when bad things happen. And it happened too often last season. Miles Robinson went into the year, knowing it was his last year. There was an offer put in front of him for as much as you could give him without making him a designated player. and he chose not to sign that. I think the offer was in front of him, I think, all year long. He was also coming back from an Achilles injury. And look, that's the other element here. And he bet on himself, and full credit to him. And the team also couldn't lock him up in 2022 because you didn't know what you were going to get when he came back. So it's one of those things. It works out to where he goes to Cincinnati, and I think maybe he fits their style of play a little bit better, honestly. He's not going to be asked to be on the ball quite as much here. You're going to bring in Stian Gregerson, who I think helps you defensively because of his comfort level on the ball, and he can still cover the ground that Miles Robinson did. So that's your kind of like for like, is Gregerson and Robinson out at center back. And we saw 30 minutes of Gregerson on Saturday against Birmingham, and it was a really good 30 minutes. Can he continue to build that chemistry with the group? He's a very different player, and we'll see how it all fits together.
Also outgoing Miguel Berry, who had flashed at certain points. I want to say it was almost like back to the MLS's back tournament, but I think he might have been just after that, where he scored
21.
3 or 4 games in a row, and it was really looking like a world beater. Obviously, you get a guy like Giacomakis, maybe he has a couple down seasons. Miguel Berry, he's off. Juan Jose Purata and Matheus Rosetto are also outgoing players. Do any of those 3 hurt particularly?
I think Hosetsu does. I might be the only one in Atlanta who says that, but I thought Hosetsu really fit well with Muyumba, and I thought you saw the best of Mateus Hosetsu in his time in Atlanta in that last third of the season last year. I thought he had a good year overall, but very, very good in the end. And having him deal with injuries in that playoff series was one of the contributing factors. I think you lost some of the strength in that midfield. Parata was a really good addition when this team needed him. He came in 22 when the team was just rifled with injuries at that time, Robinson being one of them. Parata, great energy. I thought he accepted last year when he lost the starting job to Luis Abram. He accepted it really well. He worked very, very hard. He always gave the team everything that he had when he was on the field. These were all good guys. Miguel Berry as well. He had a golazo last year against New England, ended up getting washed away when the team conceded in stoppage time. It would have been a winner. Berry was a good player off the bench, but you have upgraded, I think, in these positions going into 24. Now, the upgrades have to pan out. They have to play at the level we expect. But I think you've upgraded on paper from the outgoing players in 2024.
Now, we already touched on Gregerson. He's going to be center back there with Abram. That's going to be the middle duo that I would expect to see a lot of the time. Yeah, I think you still have Williams there. He's, I guess, one man down on the depth chart. But let's talk about some of these other incoming players. Now, we talked about Seba and Silva. I added them to the chart because it was so late August of last year. Kind of still feels to me like you have 2 new wingers there. Yeah. Kind of an upgrade on Etienne, what you had going into this season for sure. You added Derek Williams, who's going to be a nice piece, but I think most of the talk has been around the new number 6 that you guys signed, Bartosz. Is it Slish? Slish.
Yeah, Bartosz Slish. They call him Bartek as well. I'm not sure which one he prefers to go by yet. We haven't seen him in action. Work visa. We all know how this goes around the league. It can hold guys out for a little bit of time. I'm really glad we're not dealing with this as close to the start of the season like last season when Giacomakis was signed a little bit later, right at the end of the window. And then it took a month plus to get the work visa done for him to be able to jump in. He wasn't available week 1. You've got Gregerson already fully go. He's played in a preseason game now. Slish, hopefully you're going to get him as soon as possible. You will get him in preseason games for sure, barring something crazy when it comes to work visa. But you need to get him on the field to pair up with Muyumba, and we see how that looks because just like center back, which we've talked about with kind of chemistry and combination, I think 2 central midfielders, the way Atlanta plays, I mean, it's not a rigid 4-2-3-1, but if you're trying to put something to it in terms of numbers and a formation, it's a double pivot. Both players in that double pivot have freedom to go. So a lot of times it'll be one sitting behind 2. But Slish and Muyumba, they've got to get on the same page. And it just takes time. You got to get practice sessions in. You got to get games under your belt. So the sooner he can get in, the better. You also upgraded the depth, I think, for this year. You mentioned Derek Williams. I think that's going to be a really useful addition because you look at this group and Caleb Wiley's been with the U.S. men's national team, and he will probably be part of the Olympics late in the summer.
Yeah.
Stian Gregerson has been with the Norwegian national team. Luis Abram has been with the Peruvian national team. Slish has been with the Polish national team. Thiago Almada, we know right now he's with the Argentina U23. He's trying to get them qualified for the World Cup. Saba has been with the Republic of Georgia national team. Yorgos has been with the Greek national team. Then guys like Tyler Wolf have been part of youth national teams. Jay Fortune's been with Trinidad and Tobago's national team. So you got a lot of guys who are potentially going to miss some time due to national team duty. So getting a guy like Derek Williams, a guy's been around this league, he knows the league really well. I think those guys are going to be important. Getting a Dax McCarty in here is going to help with depth.
That's the one that's got to hurt, being like a Red Bull supporter myself.
Yeah.
Dax McCarty, I mean, going to the biggest rival that Red Bulls have. You can go to Nashville, play there all you want. He was there on the field losing to Atlanta the one year we were supposed to win it all. That's got to sting. I'm hoping kind of on the inside he's just there as like the Manchurian number 6. Like he's just going to destroy the team from the inside out. There's got to be some hope. What a consummate pro. And, players like this, like he could be on the bench and still make the team better.
Yes, I think that's why you bring him in. I think he's somebody, too, starting to think about what's next in his career after his playing days are done and come into a club like Atlanta where he could get some experience working with kids in the academy. He's going to have some young midfielders around him in that group. Jay Fortune, a homegrown player. I think Jay Fortune will really benefit from being around Dax McCarty day in and day out. Aiden Torres, who's a homegrown, will probably play mostly with the twos this year, 16 years old. I mean, who are you going to learn better from about that position than a guy like Dax McCarty, who has been there and done that at the highest of high levels in this league?
I love it. So let's pretend I never watched Atlanta United play, have no idea about coaching, tactics, formation, anything. What is the game plan? Let's talk X's and O's for a minute here.
I'll tell you what Bartosz Slish said when he was asked about, when you watched the games back from Atlanta United after they showed interest in you, what did you take away from it? And he's like, all the highlights were on offense. Everything was on offense. This team wants to get forward. And you have that lineup set up right there. Caleb Wiley gets forward really well. Brooks Lennon, obviously, double-digit assists. He gets forward really well. William Ba had some goals in him last season. Slish has some goals in him or assists in him. Thiago Almada, Yorgos Yakimakis, double-digit goals. I think Saba and Shande both are capable of getting into that 10-goal kind of a contribution. So that's a lot of offense. Now, you've got to find a little more balance this year. And this was something, go back to the very beginning of Atlanta United and the talk about how this team wanted to be. Identity can take shape in something like Peter Vermes and Sporting Kansas City talked about the 4-3-3 so much, and their identity kind of came from playing in that shape. It's purely playing in that shape. And they've done some different ways of playing in that shape, sometimes very possession oriented, sometimes very direct, but it's the shape that is what defines it. Philadelphia, Red Bull, St. Louis, Cincinnati, they all have definition due to their pressing style. They do it differently. All of them have different nuances to it, but they press, and that's what you think of when you think of them. With Atlanta United, honestly, from day one, even with Frank de Boer, and a lot of people talking about how that team was more defensive, second half of the year, they scored boatloads of goals.
I will never forget the first season of De Boer. I think Atlanta started with a little away stretch, maybe 2 or 3 games to start the season away. When they came back, there was like a fan reaction video from one of those, every club has their, Atlanta United fan TV, whatever YouTube. It's a guy with a mic giving people, putting a mic in front of people who maybe have overindulged in that night. And there were 4 or 5 people in a row, anger. Like, you guys just want to cup your first year. Like, maybe settle down a little bit. Yelling at the mic. This isn't Atlanta football. This isn't Atlanta soccer. We need to score goals. Frank de Boer's got to go. You guys were shipping him out 4 games into the season. Fans dropping all kinds of, crazy takes about, how Atlanta must be an offense-first this is about entertainment. It's about soccer, but it's about entertainment. We're not German. We're not Italian. We need to put 30 goals, on the board each and every week.
I know there was like disappointment when that team went on I think 5-game shutout streak, and it was absurd. I mean, the team was so good defensively in that first half once they got settled, and then you had some injuries, you had some lack of availability, and you had to shift things around, and it worked and it clicked, and the offense came together. But yeah, I mean, the idea of this team scoring goals, that's been there from day one, and when they don't score tons and tons of goals, there have been some overreactions. This team with Gonzalo Pineda, I've said it multiple times, and I feel like sometimes maybe people are looking at me like I've got 3 heads, but Gonzalo Pineda is the most risk-taking manager that Atlanta United has had. So when you go back to that idea of, like, oh, we don't want this, we don't want to be defensive, we don't want that. This is what everybody's wanted. You can't have it both ways. It's very, very difficult to have a team that is going to commit offense, and also be so good defensively. The only way you do that is if you control possession in the 80% kind of idea, and then you can deal with counters as well. It's a lot of stuff to put together. In a cap league, you're probably not going to do that. You're not going to be Manchester City or Barcelona at their peak. You're going to have to sacrifice a little bit. They sacrificed too much defensively last year. And like I said, a lot of it was down to individual errors and mistakes. You're going to concede goals the way this team plays. You are, and that's fine, because you're going to score a boatload of goals with all of this offensive talent. The trade-off is you've got to get just a little more balance, just a little more security. And I think Gregerson helps with that a good bit. You're going to have somebody who dominates in the air. Parata was good in the air. Robinson was good in the air. Gregerson's 6'5". He's a monster in terms of physical. So you're going to dominate in the air maybe like you haven't in the past. Slish is, I think, that perfect combination, maybe since this team's had Carlos Carmona in year one, of a 6 who is not purely a 6. He can play. He's good with the ball at his feet. He dribbles forward well. His progressive passing is good, but he can get into tackles and he can get physical. He gives you both. So I think with that, and also one other element to last year's defense that you have to keep in mind, early in the year, Brooks Lennon and Caleb Wiley played a lot of winger because you were missing players up high on the field. You also were doing some different things defensively, trying to find that right combination. In that stretch where the team got so good after Leagues Cup, when you added Saba, when you added Shande, you were able to play them at fullback, and you were able to play them on the back line. And I thought Caleb and Brooks both took big steps forward with their 1v1 defending last year. So you should be better. You've got to be better if you want to be a top 4 team in the East, if you want to be a cup contender, a trophy contender on multiple fronts. You can't give up the goals that they gave up last year. I think those things have been addressed. Now players have to perform.
Wiley and Brooks Lennon, I love that you talked about them, combined 8 goals and 16 assists during the regular season last year.
A lot out of your fullback.
That's more assists than most top 2 attacking players on a lot of teams. And 8 goals, that's more. Now, we just previewed the New York Red Bulls. That's more than any player on that roster by 5 goals. Oh. So, that is kind of rough. Are you ever concerned with these 2 guys that maybe they're better in a 5-man system? Maybe they're better wing backs than true fullbacks. I have that feeling about Wiley sometimes. Like, I don't want to put a collar on him and keep him back.
I actually was really impressed with last year, and something that came up, Gonzalo Pineda talked to us about it. Caleb talked to us about it when the idea of getting him back to fullbacks. He played fullback coming up in the academy. He played fullback with Atlanta United too. His journey to this point is honestly really similar to Alphonso Davies in terms of early on when you get him into the first team, you want to protect him defensively because he's young. So you play him higher up the field. You let him impact the game with his pace. And then you start to slowly integrate him into that back line. Well, one of the reasons that you wanted to do that last year, besides the fact that I think he made you better defensively, is you had to protect, I think, his lungs a little bit. This is a guy who, when he's feeling it, he is up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And what was happening was he'd have to come out of games in the 70th minute, the 65th minute. He wasn't able to get 90 minutes in regularly. So in that stretch where the team really improved, and defensively that was a part of that improvement, Caleb, I think, figured out how to manage his workload a little bit better. He's playing full 90s, and he was picking his spots to go, not just bombing up and down. He was picking his times to go. And when it wasn't the right time, or when Brooks Lennon found the time to go, Caleb would tuck in and create a little bit of a three where he would be the left-sided center back. It'd be typically Robinson or Abram, in this case, Abram in the middle and Robinson to the right. Then that freed Brooks up to either go up high on the wing, or what ended up happening a lot, and these are the things that I think a full preseason will help, Lennon came inside. Think Manchester City, Pep Guardiola, and guys like Kyle Walker tucking in, the fullback tucking in and becoming an additional central midfielder.
Yeah, we saw like Tyler Adams do that for the U.S. men's national team a little bit when they just shifted their 4-man back line to a 3-man back line.
Yeah, it gives you a little more protection against the counter. And if you're going to commit numbers forward, you have to have that in the back of your mind. How can I be just a little more secure? And when Lennon is high up the field and you turn the ball over, your winger who's tucked in because Lennon's out stretching the touchline, that winger's not going to make the run back. Then Brooks has got to make a ridiculous run back. He's probably not going to get there. You've got to figure out those things that can give you that little bit of security that you need. And I thought Wiley picking his spots and going, tucking in when he wasn't, and Lennon coming inside a little bit more. And sometimes he'd pop up next to the 6, sometimes next to the 10, sometimes next to Yorgos. That gave you, because he's central, just a little bit more security to deal with those counters.
Love it. Dax McCarty is a guy that you can plug in there. Really, really easy to plug that gap for the last 15 minutes and actually close out some of these games.
Yeah.
Now, I want to finish up and talk a little bit about some storylines we should be following. So this is one of the things I like to think of when I'm watching soccer. Like, of course, you're just watching to enjoy, but throughout the season, I like to, like Colorado, I'm going to be watching, like, how does the rebuild fit? How do these new pieces fit together? For Atlanta, what is it that we're going to be looking at? I started out with the obvious one. Can the defense keep Atlanta competitive? I believe that's going to be a yes. I think we've kind of burnt that down a little bit.
Fingers crossed
earlier today.
Fingers crossed on that one. But yeah, I think they've addressed it well for it to be much improved.
The next one for me, and this is, Atlanta's always been a big club as far as filling needs, replacing players that they sold. Do they have another big summer transfer window? And do you see incoming, outgoing? We already talked about Almada is likely out sometime in the next 12 months. Could very well be this summer if the price is right. Do you see any other transfers ingoing or outgoing?
Caleb Wiley's one to keep an eye on. I think when you're talking about a player as young as he is, with as many games under his belt as he has, he's getting national team caps now. He's going to draw interest, and he might be. And it's so hard to predict. It's so hard to call, and we don't know what happens next for Caleb. But he might be Atlanta's first 8-figure homegrown transfer. George Bello was a transfer out at left back. It feels like Atlanta United just keeps producing left backs. There's another one coming. He an academy player. He played on Saturday in Birmingham, who's 16. But Caleb's going to draw interest. I think he's the next one that is kind of on my radar for an outgoing. Some of the guys that they've brought in, like Saba, like Yorgos, Shande, I think will fit into this as well. Maybe Muyamba to a lesser extent. Not the incoming this window, but the incoming last year. There were rumors about Giacomakis drawing interest, and I think it would take something pretty big and pretty like a big club too for him to want to go. Because I think these guys came to Atlanta for more reasons than purely the money side. I think these are all guys who I think in one way or another are thinking about family and thinking about where they want to be and what kind of city they want to live in and where they want to play their soccer. And it's something that even going back to Darren Eales and Garth Lagerwey has referenced this as well. Carlos Bocanegra has referenced this as well. It's the next step for MLS where you get guys who could go to a lower tier team in France, who could go into a lower tier team in La Liga or Serie A, or go into a higher tier team in Scandinavia or the Netherlands or Belgium. And they choose to be in MLS. They choose to be in Atlanta. And when you're drawing what Atlanta's drawing and you play in a stadium like Atlanta plays in, and you have I think just the quality of life, yeah, I think you're going to get some of these guys who decide, you know what, I'm going to stay here, even if I've got an offer to go to Europe or go back to Europe. You're going to get the guys like Caleb and Thiago that are young and have it, kind of drilled into their head that you go to Europe. And I get it. Some guys need to go to Europe. But for others, I think you're going to see more that want to stay here. So Caleb's the one that I'm looking at. In terms of incoming, I mean, that depth chart is pretty well filled out.
Yeah.
You're not really looking at, like, I've got to go upgrade this position.
You're our fourth season preview for a reason, because there's not still holes to be plugged in. I don't expect any more winter signings, right? Like, you guys are done for this window, I would assume.
I think maybe you're looking at like a third forward. That's the one, or maybe a one more player who can play left back. You've got Ronald Hernandez and Aiden McFadden who can play on the left side. They're natural right backs. Maybe something like that, but not somebody who I think starts more than 5 games if people stay healthy. I think you're looking at somebody for depth, and in one of those two spots, maybe both. I don't know. But in terms of how you replace Almada when that day comes, that's the biggest thing hanging over this roster and how it's structured. And you just don't know, because you don't know when that time comes. These are things that are out of your control. I'm sure there are plans in place for, if we make this is the kind of area we're talking about looking at, and how much we spend. And these are guys who fit that. And these are guys that we think we could get quickly. And these are guys that would maybe be more of a wild card to go get. So that's the unpredictable element. And we just don't know when that plan springs into action. But I mean, you're getting quite a few reporters because you're at the end of that European window. And I feel like I've talked about this at the end of each window. Now you're at the point in Europe where you've got some clubs that have maybe made some sales and have some money sitting in the bank account. You've got some clubs that maybe are in desperate positions to either get into the Champions League next year, or stay in the Champions League next year, or Europa League, and they're looking to go upgrade. Or you've got injuries that have happened and players need to be replaced. So you're going to have a lot of talk about Almada right now
for
the rest of this week. And you might have action. You might. If somebody comes in with the right amount of money and it's the right deal for Thiago as well, you might. You also might not. And there's just no way. Nobody can sit here, and I'm not going to do it. And anybody who tries to, they're flat out lying to you. Nobody knows what's going to happen, because there are so many possible moving parts to it. But there's definite interest, and there's gonna be, I would think, an offer. And there's talk about, has there been an offer? Who knows? There's gonna be teams that are going to be circling. And does it happen now? Okay, then you've got time to add somebody and you'll have them for most of the season. Does it happen in the summer? That might be trickier to deal with. Does it happen at the end of the year? That would be easier to deal with. Who knows? But it's going to happen at some point.
His market value on transfermarkt.us, which is kind of one of the big soccer tools that we use here on the show, $27 million. So
yeah, I mean, that's about what's being talked about. The reports out of Italy today were that Atlanta was asking 25 million euro, which would put you about in that ballpark.
Yeah, probably even a little higher.
Yeah, I mean, I've thought 30 might be that number. I think 30 gets the deal done for sure. But if 25 is where the line is kind of set, euro, so that's around 28 million, I think. Can you wiggle around a little bit when you talk about add-ons or performance incentives? Sure, you can. The numbers can be finessed in different ways, but that's
sell-on fees, stuff like that. That's the new hotness in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways to do it, and a sell-on fee on Almada would be a really good thing to have. You have to wait a little bit more for that money, but you're going to have some level of a sell-on. But, you get into that kind of range, I don't know, I'm trying to think, because he's not going to go to, like, the Middle East. He's not going to go to Asia. It's going to be Europe. It's going to be probably a top 5 league, because I don't think you're going to get a Benfica, a Sporting, and Ajax, those kinds of clubs. I don't think they're going to come with that much. So you're talking a top 5 league, and you're probably talking about 25 to 30 clubs that would be possible to spend that money and be realistic. And I don't know if any of them come or if multiple ones come. If you're Atlanta United, you'd love to have a bidding war. That'd be great. But you also have to think too, and this is something that I think gets lost in this conversation when it comes to MLS players going to Europe. You have to get him to the right spot as well. You have to think a little bit about not just chasing the dollar, but getting him into a place where he's young. That sell-on fee's going to be lucrative if things go the way you expect. He's got to go somewhere and thrive. And you also want a guy that you've invested in, I think, from on the soccer field, but also as a person. You know, like you want him to thrive. You don't want to just ship him off somewhere. You want him to be in a spot where he's settled and he's happy and would suit him. So we'll see. It's going to be a wild few days. And just judging from today, how the rumor mill has been spinning, and now you got Teise out of Argentina talking, and it's going to be interesting. They play tomorrow with the Argentine U23s. So, I mean, he's away with the national team. So I don't know how things get done in this window right now, but there's going to be a lot of talk over the next few days. That's for sure.
Let's finish up again. Jason Longshore, thank you so much for being here with us. Always one of our favorite guests. I can say friend of the show now, right? I think we've been on enough. It definitely fits. There's like a depending on how famous you are, like if you have someone really famous on your show, one appearance, friend of the show. Guys like me, we need to be like every Wednesday for 2 years before you're a friend of the show. But for you, I think we're comfortable calling you that. What should we expect from this team this year?
Fun, goals, highlights. I think like Bartosz said, lots of offensive highlights. I think that's a definite.
Trophies.
Yeah, I think you should. I think you should expect that. I expect. I guess where I draw the line in those sorts of things, because you can't guarantee trophies. You never can. Things can happen. You get into a final and you have an early red card or crazy things can happen. I mean, you got Miami.
At home to Atlanta United the year that you're already MLS Cup champions.
You've got things like Miami that they're gonna challenge for all 4 trophies. Okay, good luck. Might have to pick up their defense as well. You need to be competing for trophies this year, and if that means getting to semifinals of Leagues Cup, Open Cup, of the leagues, or getting to the Eastern Conference Final, I think if you get to one of those, it's going to be hard to be down about it. I think it's really hard to win trophies in this league now. If you get to that point, I'm happy. I'm happy with the overall season. I'll be disappointed that it didn't go further. This past year was a really good step in the right direction. I think this year it's about improving the mentality. It's about being a little grittier, a little more difficult to beat, a little nastier in the middle of the park at times. You just got to have that to you. I think they've got the right pieces to do it. And now I want to see how this group comes together.
Absolutely. We'll be there watching all season. Thank you again, Jason, and thank you everyone for watching at home. Keep in mind, if you are watching this live, it is 9:30 on what day is it? Monday. Yeah. St. Louis City is coming up right there. So if you guys want to head over to the St. Louis City YouTube stream, we guys will be live very shortly. Jason, thank you so much again. Have a wonderful week, and I'm sure I'll hit you up sometime soon when you guys are headed to Red Bull Arena. All right?
We'll be up there. Yeah, we'll catch up.
Be good, everyone. Have a great night.